The stage upon which our Leviathan's life would play out was not the familiar, climatically turbulent world of the modern era, but a planet caught in a protracted, deep breath of warmth known as the Middle Miocene climatic optimum. To step into this epoch, some 14 to 15 million years before the present, is to step into an Earth that would feel profoundly alien in its geography and its abundance. The great ice caps of Antarctica and Greenland were but shrunken, tenuous sheets. Their weakness meant that the world's water was not locked in frozen reservoirs, but liberated into the global ocean basin. Sea levels stood an estimated 40 to 60 meters higher than today's shorelines. This was not a simple flooding of coastal plains. It was a wholesale reconfiguration of continents. Vast, shallow, sun-drenched seas sprawled across the interiors of continents. The Central American seaway still fully open, connecting the Pacific and Atlantic. The Paratethys Sea, a massive remnant of the ancient Tethys Ocean, still dominating central Eurasia, and epicontinental waters flooding vast tracts of North America, Australia, and South America. These were not deep, dark basins, but immense marine pastures, rarely more than a few hundred meters deep, where sunlight could penetrate to the seabed and fuel an explosion of benthic life. The very chemistry of the ocean was different, warmer, more alkaline and rich in dissolved silica and calcium carbonate, providing the building blocks for the skeletons of countless organisms. Our narrative lens, however, focuses on one particular theater of this global drama, the southeastern Pacific Ocean, along the western margin of the South American continent. Here, a potent oceanographic engine had already been established for millions of years, the Humboldt Current System. Driven by the prevailing southeast trade winds and the Coriolis effect, this great river within the ocean swept cold, nutrient-rich water from the Antarctic circumpolar current northward along the coast. Where this current encountered the steep submarine cliffs of the continental shelf, it was forced upward in massive, continual upwellings. These were not seasonal events, but a permanent state of geological respiration. From the lightless depths, waters laden with nitrate, phosphate, and silicate, the fertilizer of the sea, surged into the sunlit photic zone. The response was instantaneous and spectacular. Microscopic phytoplankton, primarily diatoms with their intricate glassy shells, exploded in population, forming blooms so vast they could be seen from space, turning thousands of square kilometers of ocean into a swirling greenish soup. This was the foundational feast. Upon this feast, the entire pyramid of Miocene marine life was constructed. The zooplankton, tiny crustaceans like krill and copepods, grazed in uncountable trillions, their swarms so dense they rendered the water opaque. This, in turn, attracted the filter feeders. The sea's surface was patrolled by schools of small, primitive baleen whales like Parietabellina and Pelostis, their mouths agape as they skimmed the plankton-rich broth. But the true giants of the filter-feeding guild were the cetaceans, a diverse and successful family that included animals like Diarostis and Herpetostis. Ranging from the size of a modern minke whale to that of a humpback, they were the most common large whales in these seas, their skeletons destined to litter the future seafloor in astonishing numbers. They were not alone. Enigmatic desmostylians, hippo-like, amphibious herbivores, wallowed in coastal estuaries, chewing on seagrass. Manatee and dugong relatives grazed in submerged meadows. The air above the water was a cacophony of wings and cries. Flightless, penguin-like plotopterids, some as tall as a man, porpoised through the waves. Giant, albatross-sized bony-toothed birds, Pelagornithidae, with pseudo-teeth lining their beaks, soared on immense wingspans, while early gannets and pelicans plunged into the boiling fish schools. Beneath the surface, the world teemed with a diversity of predatory fish that would make a modern marine biologist weep. Enormous tunas and billfish, ancestors of marlin and swordfish, sliced through the water at astonishing speeds. Multiple species of giant predatory sea bream and snapper-like fish occupied ecological niches now vacant. And everywhere there were sharks, not just the solitary megafauna, but a dizzying array of species. Fast-moving mako ancestors, bottom-dwelling hexanchid cow sharks, gigantic filter-feeding basking sharks and cedarinas, and robust, powerful hunters like the extinct Parototis and the broad-toothed mako Cosmopolidatus hastalis. This was a world where an apex predator had to ascend through a gauntlet of other highly capable carnivores. But the true rulers of this vertebrate domain were the marine mammals. Pinnipeds were in their heyday, with myriad species of seals and sea lions, some of gigantic size like the tusked, walrus-like pontalis, prowling the coasts and islands. The odontocetes, the toothed whales, displayed a radical evolutionary experimentation now largely lost. There were bizarre, walrus-like dolphins with sexually dimorphic tusks, Odobnostops, small river dolphin-like forms, and larger predatory sperm whales of the genus Acrophyseter, which were themselves formidable hunters. And then there were the dolphins, not just the familiar streamlined forms, but a wild variety including the long-beaked Eurynodolphis and the robust, killer whale-sized Hadrodolphis. This superabundance of prey, the seals, the dolphins, the smaller whales, created an ecological pressure valve of available energy. In any ecosystem, such a concentration of nutritious, high-calorie biomass inevitably gives rise to super predators, hypercarnivores specialized in harvesting the hunters themselves. The Miocene seas produced two such entities, evolutionary marvels that approached the theoretical limits of size and power for aquatic carnivores. One was a fish, a refinement of the shark body plan perfected over 400 million years, Carcharocles megalodon, a warm-bodied, continuously growing monster that may have reached 18 meters and 60 tons, a creature of silent ambush and overwhelming bite force. The other was a mammal. It was into this world, a world of endless summer, of staggering biomass, of constant, thrumming competition and violent death, that a new lineage of toothed whales had evolved. They had taken the basic body plan of the sperm whale, an animal already built for deep diving and powerful echolocation, and had weaponized it for a new purpose: active, macropredatorial warfare against the largest possible prey. They had traded the slender, squid-snatching lower jaw of their cousins for a massive, robust structure armed with teeth that interlocked with an equally formidable upper dentition. They had reinforced their skulls into battering rams, amplified their acoustic systems into biological sonar cannons, and developed a social intelligence to coordinate their assaults. They were the ultimate mammalian response to a world of plenty and peril. They were the kings before the ice ages, and one among them, a male born in the warm, shallow seas off a land that would one day be called Peru, was destined to have his story etched in stone. The curtain was rising on the age of Livyatan. The warm, shallow waters of the coastal shelf, where sunlight dappled the sandy bottom and forests of kelp waved in the gentle current, served as the maternity ward for Livyatan Melvillei. Here, in waters less than 200 meters deep, the threats from the open ocean were marginally reduced, and the pod of females and their young could find some semblance of sanctuary. The matriarch, a female known to us only by the fossil record she would leave, was a veteran of these nursery grounds. At nearly 16 meters in length and weighing perhaps 50 tons, her body was a testament to survival. Her skin, a dark gunmetal gray fading to a pale cream on her underside, was a canvas of history. Long, parallel scars from the teeth of rival females or amorous males, circular sucker marks from battles with giant squid in the deep, and the rough, calloused texture of her massive head from countless collisions. The birth process for a cetacean of her size was an act of profound vulnerability and precise instinct. As labor commenced, she was attended by her sister, a smaller female who acted as a midwife, staying close, offering physical support and vigilant sonar scans of the surroundings. The rest of the pod, a loose aggregation of 3 other mothers with calves of varying ages, formed a protective perimeter, their clicks and creaks creating a constant, surveillant acoustic net. The calf emerged tail first, a crucial adaptation to prevent drowning. It was not a gentle slip into the water, but a strenuous, pulsating expulsion. The newborn male was immense by any modern standard, over 6 meters long from the tip of his blunt, squared snout to the notch of his flukes, and weighing an estimated 2 to 3 tons, the size of a large van. He was a miniature replica of his mother, but his skin was smoother, darker, and free of scars, and his body was proportioned differently, with a head that seemed even more disproportionately large for his frame. His first instinct was not to breathe, but to swim. Powerful, uncoordinated strokes of his embryonic flukes propelled him instinctively upward, guided by his mother's supporting flipper. The journey to the surface, only 20 meters, felt like an eternity. Breaking into the world of air and light, he exhaled a wet gasp and then inhaled sharply. His blowhole, located on the left side of his head at the front of the great spermaceti organ basin, opened with a distinct, sharp pffshh sound. The first breath of a whale is not a passive act. The muscles must work forcefully to reinflate the collapsed alveoli of the lungs. For several minutes, he breathed in rapid succession, his small, dark eyes positioned far back on the sides of his head for wide peripheral vision, taking in the blur of sky, the looming shape of his mother, and the glittering surface. The initial hours were a cascade of new sensations and critical learning. His mother's side was his entire world. He nursed within the first hour, guided to the paired mammary slits concealed near her genital slit. The milk of Livyatan was not a thin liquid, but a viscous, paste-like substance with a fat content exceeding 50%, akin to yogurt. He fed by curling his tongue into a tube, creating a seal, while his mother could voluntarily contract muscles to eject the milk into his mouth. A single feeding could provide hundreds of thousands of calories, fueling a growth rate of nearly 100 kilograms per day in the early stages. Between feedings, which occurred every 20-30 minutes, he practiced the basics of cetacean life: buoyancy control, coordinating his flukes and flippers, and most importantly, listening. Sound was his primary sense. Even in utero, he would have been immersed in the constant acoustic environment of the pod. Now he began to differentiate the sounds. His mother's identity coda, a unique pattern of clicks that was her acoustic signature, was his anchor. Her standard echolocation clicks, emitted from the phonic lips in her nasal passage and focused forward by the spermaceti organ, were a rapid tick-tick-tick-tick, like a biotechnical Geiger counter. These clicks, some of the most powerful biological sounds on the planet, traveled through the water, hit objects, and returned as echoes. To the calf, they initially meant nothing but noise. But as his brain, already large and complex, began to process the returning signals, he started to learn the acoustic landscape. The hard, sharp echo of the rocky reef to the east, the soft, diffuse echo cloud of a distant fish school, the distinctive, hollow, complex echo of another whale. His own sound production system was nascent. The nasal passages, the phonic lips, and the spermaceti organ were all present but not yet fully coordinated. He produced clicks, but they were weaker, unfocused, and irregular, the acoustic equivalent of a toddler's babble. Through trial and error, he learned to modulate them, to aim his head to direct the sound beam. This biosonar was not just for navigation. It was the pod's social media and early warning system. The mothers maintained a near constant, low-level scanning of the environment. The sudden shift in a mother's click pattern from a slow scan to a rapid, targeted barrage signaled immediate danger. That danger was omnipresent. The nursery grounds were rich and predators knew it. A lone, large Cosmopolitatus haestalis shark, a mako on steroids, would occasionally streak through the periphery, testing the pod's defenses. The mothers would respond by forming a tight, protective circle around the calves, heads outward, emitting loud, aggressive bangs, powerful, low-frequency pulses meant to startle and disorient. But the true terror was the sporadic, ghostly silhouette that sometimes materialized at the edge of visibility. A Carcharocal's megalodon, even a sub-adult one at 10 meters, was a presence that altered the very physics of the water around it. Its approach was often detected first by the unusual behavior of fish and smaller sharks fleeing before it. When the pod's sonar confirmed the threat, the enormous, dense, muscular return echo of a creature that simply had too much mass, the response was immediate and strategic. They would stop all vocalization, gather the calves between them, and move as one, not in panic, but with deliberate speed towards shallower water, where the giant shark's maneuverability was hampered. It was a game of deterrence and positioning, the first of many lessons the calf would absorb about the delicate balance of power at the apex. In his first weeks, the calf also began to interact with the other youngsters in the pod. There was a female calf, a month older and already more confident, and a yearling male who was boisterous and playful. Their play was physical and purposeful. They practiced coordinated swimming, drafting in each other's slipstreams. They engaged in mock battles, opening their jaws wide in gaping displays, their tiny, unerupted tooth buds hidden beneath the gums. They would charge and gently butt their massive heads against each other's bodies, testing balance and neck strength. They even practiced rudimentary hunting behaviors, herding small schools of fry or chasing jellyfish. All of this was done under the watchful, clicking surveillance of the mothers, who were not just protecting, but teaching through passive observation. The calf's body was changing rapidly. His blubber layer thickened, providing insulation and energy reserves. The muscles controlling his flukes and flippers grew stronger, allowing for bursts of speed. And his head, that colossal, distinctive feature, began to take on its definitive shape. The basin in his skull, which housed the spermaceti organ, was deepening. This organ, a complex mass of waxy oil-filled sacs and connective tissue, served multiple functions. It focused his outgoing echolocation clicks into a directional beam. It likely acted as a ram for use in combat, and it may have aided in buoyancy control. Its development was key to his future as a hunter. By the end of his first year, he was over 8 meters long, a thriving, curious, and increasingly capable young Livyatan, already imprinted with the acoustic map of his home waters and the unspoken rules of pod life. The protective lagoon of infancy was soon to be exchanged for the dangerous, exhilarating classroom of the open hunt. The transition from milk to meat was not a switch, but a slow, bloody, and meticulously guided curriculum. The calf, now a yearling of over 8 meters, possessed a body built for power but a mind still naive to the precise application of violence. His mother, the stern and experienced matriarch, was his primary instructor, but the entire pod functioned as a living university of predation. The first lessons were in acoustical discrimination. His mother would cease her own echolocation and encourage him to scan their surroundings. Initially, his world was a blur of returning echoes. A rock, a fish, and a piece of drifting seaweed produced similar, confusing sonar pictures. She taught him to listen for the nuances, the hard, sharp, multifaceted return of a crab shell versus the softer, more diffuse echo of a fish's flesh. Most crucially, she guided him to identify the bright signature. In the sonar image of a marine mammal, a seal, a dolphin, a small whale, the air-filled lungs and sinuses created cavities that returned exceptionally strong, clear echoes. They stood out in the acoustic landscape like lanterns in a fog. The yearling learned to differentiate the small, quick double lantern of a porpoise from the larger, slower signature of a resting seal. The first live prey was not a warm-blooded creature, but fish. The pod employed a sophisticated herding technique. Several adults would swim in a tightening circle around a school of medium-sized mackerel or bonito, emitting a barrage of rapid, low-intensity clicks that seemed to disorient and compact the fish into a terrified, shimmering bait ball. Then, an adult, often the yearling's aunt, would deliver the coup de grace, a focused, high-intensity acoustic pulse. This was not a simple loud click, but a concussive blast of sound, a biological shockwave generated by the phonic lips and focused by the spermaceti organ. The effect on the fish was immediate and catastrophic. Their swim bladders, delicate air-filled organs used for buoyancy, resonated violently with the sound frequency and ruptured. The fish, stunned or killed, sank in a twitching rain. The yearling was permitted to swoop in and snatch the crippled fish. This was his introduction to the mechanics of his bite. His teeth, though still small and not fully erupted, were already conical and bore the fine serrations that were the family trademark. He learned to grip, not just swallow. He felt the crunch of vertebrae, the tear of flesh. The taste of blood and oil was novel, exciting, a primal signal of success. These fish hunting exercises were as much about coordination as killing. He learned to anticipate the movements of his pod mates, to time his own approach so as not to disrupt the formation, to understand his role in a collective endeavor. The first significant milestone, the true initiation into his destiny, occurred when he was perhaps 18 months old. The pod, cruising the edge of a submarine canyon, detected the distinctive chattering echolocation of a group of early dolphins, kentriodon-like creatures about 3 meters long. The mood of the pod shifted instantly. The casual, scanning clicks ceased. A new, purposeful silence fell, broken only by sporadic, very soft, searching clicks from the matriarch. She was formulating a plan, and she communicated it not with sound, but with subtle body language and positioning. She broke away from the pod with a powerful stroke of her flukes, followed by her sister and the yearling. The other mothers remained with the younger calves. This was a hunting party. They dove deep, using the dark blue water as cover, and approached the dolphin group from below and behind. The yearling felt a thrill of adrenaline, a new kind of focus sharpening his senses. He watched his mother. She selected a target, a slightly slower individual on the fringe of the pod. With a burst of acceleration that shocked the yearling with its violence, she shot upward. She did not bite first. She rammed. Using her massive, blunt head like a piston, she struck the dolphin amidships. The sound was a sickening, deep thump that traveled through the water. The dolphin was catapulted sideways, its body contorted, likely with ribs shattered and lungs collapsed. Before it could recover, the matriarch opened her jaws. The yearling saw, for the first time, the full, terrifying gape of an adult Livyatan. The mouth was a pink cavern lined with rows of sharp, gleaming teeth. The bite was not a shake, but a precise, crushing clamp. The teeth punched through blubber and muscle, seeking the spine. There was a final, violent jerk of her head, a crisp snap audible even at a distance, and the dolphin went limp. The yearling was allowed to feed. Tearing into the warm carcass was a different experience entirely from eating fish. The blubber was thick and rich, the meat dark and dense with myoglobin. He learned to strip flesh in great strips using his teeth as saws. He learned the locations of the choicest parts, the energy-dense tongue, the fatty cheeks, the liver. This was the fuel that would build a giant. As he grew, his role in these hunts evolved. He graduated from observer to participant. He learned to be the driver, using his body to herd prey toward the waiting jaws of an elder. He practiced his own ramming technique on floating logs, learning to align his massive skull and brace his neck muscles for the impact. His own echolocation became a surgical tool. He could now not only identify a lung signature, but discern its size, its depth in the body, even the animal's orientation. He could tell if a seal was facing him or turned away, a critical detail for planning an attack vector. The social lessons of the hunt were as vital as the physical ones. He learned the consequences of greed. Lunging for the kill at the wrong time could spoil the entire pod's effort. He learned the value of patience, of holding position in the cold, dark water while the plan unfolded. He learned to interpret the subtle click codes that signaled hold, advance, strike, and abort. This was a language of life and death, a syntax of coordination that elevated the pod from a group of individuals into a single, distributed organism of predation. His first solo kill of a sizable warm-blooded prey came in his 3rd year. He had strayed slightly from the pod, practicing his sonar scans, when he detected the lone echo of a young fur seal resting at the surface. The instinctual sequence, drilled into him through observation and guided practice, fired through his neural pathways. Assess, approach from depth, final, silent glide, strike. His ramming technique was imperfect. He hit the seal slightly off-center, stunning it but not incapacitating it. It writhed, biting at his face with its sharp canine teeth, which scraped harmlessly against his thick, tough skin. Panic flared for a second, but then training took over. He opened his jaws and clamped down. The feeling was profoundly different from the yielding flesh of the fish or the shared dolphin carcass. This was his struggle, his victory. The seal's struggle ceased. The taste of its blood in the water was a potent, personal marker of transition. He was no longer just a calf. He was a hunter. But the education was far from complete. He had yet to confront the true foundation of his species, supremacy, the hunting of other whales. This would come later, under the tutelage of the pod's largest males, when he was strong enough to contribute to and survive the chaotic, titanic violence of a whale hunt. For now, he was an adept student. his body thickening with muscle, his teeth emerging fully from his gums, ivory white daggers that would soon bear the stains of a lifetime of use. The playful headbutts of infancy were gone, replaced by more serious, testing shoves with other sub-adults, the first rumblings of the competitive hierarchy that would define his adult life. The protective, all-encompassing world of the nursery pod was beginning to feel restrictive. The vast, open ocean, with all its dangers and its boundless opportunities for a skilled hunter, was calling. The ocean our young Livyatan inhabited was a dual monarchy. His path to sovereignty would forever be shadowed by the other claimant to the throne, Carchiracle's Megalodon. To understand his life is to understand this perpetual, existential dialogue with the shark. It was not a constant war, but a tense, dynamic equilibrium, a cold war conducted in the medium of salt water, where every encounter was a recalibration of power. The two monarchs were built from different evolutionary blueprints, products of divergent lineages that had converged on the same terrifying solution. Livyatan was endothermic, a warm-blooded engine that burned calories at a ferocious rate to maintain a high, constant internal temperature, granting him endurance, a faster metabolism, and the ability to hunt in colder, deeper waters. Megalodon was a regional endotherm, a gigantotherm. Its immense size allowed it to retain metabolic heat, giving it a degree of thermal inertia and stability, but it was still ultimately a fish, reliant on the ambient temperature of the water to a greater degree. Their senses defined their worlds. Livyatan lived in a universe of sound. His biosonar constructed a high-resolution, three-dimensional map of his surroundings, revealing structure, density, and internal anatomy. He could see the beating heart and air-filled lungs of a prey item hidden in murk or darkness. Megalodon's world was one of chemistry and electromagnetism. Its primary tools were the ampullae of Lorenzini, gel-filled pores in its snout that could detect the minute bioelectric fields generated by the muscle contractions of any living animal. It could sense a wounded creature's struggling heartbeat from miles away. It could also smell a single drop of blood diluted in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Where Livyatan used active sonar, Megalodon was a passive listener, a ghost in the water, leaving no trace of its approach. Their hunting strategies were a study in contrast. Livyatan was a strategist, a pack hunter capable of astonishing coordination and complex planned assaults. His attacks were often targeted, aimed at crippling specific anatomical points, flippers, flukes, the spine behind the skull. Megalodon was an ambusher and a brutalist. It often attacked from below, its strategy built around a single catastrophic bite. Its serrated, triangular teeth, sometimes over 18 centimeters long, were designed not for holding or precise cutting but for shearing. It would bite through flippers, tail stalks, and entire thoracic cavities, inflicting massive hemorrhagic trauma, then retreat and wait for its prey to bleed to death. It was a hit-and-run artist of colossal scale. For the young Livyatan, Megalodon was the ever-present specter. Its form was known not by sight, but by the reaction it provoked. The sudden silence of the fish schools, the frantic, scattered echoes of panicking dolphins, the distinctive low-frequency vibration of an immense tail sweeping through the water, and then the echo itself, an echo so large, so dense, and so muscular it had a texture all its own. It wasn't the hollow, complex echo of a whale, but a solid, meaty return that spoke of pure, compact power. His first direct encounter came when he was a sub-adult of about 10 meters. The pod was feeding on a whale carcass, a dead sea otter that had sunk to the seafloor in 300 meters of water. They were taking turns gouging out great chunks of blubber, their sonar clicks echoing loudly in the deep. Suddenly, the matriarch issued a sharp, staccato burst of clicks, the danger signal. All feeding stopped. From the inky darkness beyond the range of their sonar, a shape resolved. It was not a full-sized adult, but a megalodon of perhaps 11 meters, a formidable adolescent in its own right. It circled slowly, drawn by the scent of blood and the sounds of feeding. The pod closed ranks, forming a defensive sphere with the younger members in the center. The adults, including our young male, faced outward, heads lowered. They began a coordinated acoustic display. A repetitive, booming bang, bang, bang emitted in unison. These were not echolocation clicks, but deterrent sounds, meant to overload the shark's sensitive electroreceptors and disorient it. The megalodon hesitated. It was faced not with a single, large prey item, but a coordinated, noisy, and potentially dangerous group. It made a few closer passes, its dark eye a blank, black orb reflecting the dim bioluminescence. For a tense minute, the two super predators assessed each other across an abyss of mutual respect and hunger. Then, with a lazy flick of its caudal fin, the shark melted back into the gloom. The pod waited a long time before resuming feeding, and they did so with heightened vigilance. This encounter taught the young Livyatan a crucial lesson. Intimidation was a viable strategy. Strength was not just about physical power, but about the projection of it. A united front could deter a superior force. He also learned the shark's limitations. In a direct, face-to-face confrontation in open water, the megalodon seemed cautious, unwilling to risk injury from the whale's battering ram heads and bone-crushing bites. As he grew larger and began to venture more solo, the dynamics changed. He was now too big for most sharks to consider as prey, but a fully grown, 16-meter-plus megalodon was another matter. These encounters were less about pod defense and more about personal dominance. He learned to use his biosonar as a tactical advantage. He could track the shark perfectly, even in total darkness, while the shark could only sense his bioelectric field and vibrations when he moved. By staying relatively still, he could become acoustically visible but electromagnetically quiet. One such encounter occurred near a steep undersea cliff. A large female megalodon, perhaps 15 meters long, had picked up his trail. He sensed her approach long before she could see him. Instead of fleeing, he positioned himself with the cliff face to his back, eliminating the possibility of an ambush from below or behind. When the shark finally came into visual range, a monstrous silhouette in the blue haze, he turned to face it head on. He did not vocalize. He simply hovered, his immense, blocky head pointed directly at the shark, a living fortress. He slowly opened his jaws, a deliberate, terrifying display of his dentition, teeth meant for grasping and crushing as opposed to her slashing blades. The message was clear: I see you. I am not prey. An attack will cost you dearly. The shark circled twice, its movements slow, calculating. It too recognized an untenable fight. It veered away and disappeared. The fossil record whispers of times when this Cold War turned hot. Whale bones from the Miocene, particularly ribs and vertebrae, have been found with deep, gouging bite marks that match megalodon teeth. And rarer still, megalodon vertebrae have been discovered with punctures and crushing damage consistent with the bite of a massive, raptorial sperm whale. These are the smoking guns. They tell of moments when hunger, territorial dispute, or sheer chance tipped the balance. Perhaps a Livyatan was caught alone and exhausted after a difficult hunt. Perhaps a megalodon ambushed a mother defending her calf. In these violent intersections, the outcome was not predetermined. It was a clash of titans, where the whale's intelligence and sociality battled the shark's stealth and devastating first strike. The scars our Livyatan would carry on his skin and in his bones were not just from rivals of his own kind. Some were likely the parting gifts of the shark, testament to skirmishes survived in the endless, silent duel for oceanic supremacy. The sub-adult wanderings were over. Our Livyatan, now a mature male in the full flush of his power, had reached his apotheosis. At 17 meters from the scarred tip of his snout to the broad, powerful notch of his flukes, and weighing an estimated 65 tons, he was a creature of such profound physical presence that he seemed to bend the ecology around him. His was a solitary sovereignty now. The nursery pods, the playful alliances, the tense hierarchies of bachelor groups, these were behind him. He was a patriarch without a permanent family, a wanderer whose domain was the entire humbled current system, from the frigid, nutrient-rich upwellings of the south to the warmer, calmer breeding lagoons thousands of kilometers to the north. His body was a living monument to his history. The once smooth skin of his flanks and back was a topographic map of past conflicts. Long, parallel grooves, some as wide as a human hand, were etched deep into the blubber, the calling cards of rival Livyatan males, raked by serrated teeth during dominance disputes. A constellation of circular, paler scars, each the size of a dinner plate, dotted his head and shoulders. The suction cup welts of giant squid, earned in midnight battles a kilometer below the surface. His flukes were notched. His dorsal hump was crisscrossed with old, healed gashes, and the skin around his massive jaw was thick and calloused, like the leather of a worn battle shield. His teeth, those infamous ivory daggers, were no longer pristine. Their razor-sharp serrations were worn smooth at the tips from years of biting bone. Some bore hairline fractures. Others were stained a dark, yellowish-brown from a lifetime of exposure to blood and seawater. They were the tools of a working monarch, not for show, but for brutal, applied function. His daily existence was a rhythm of immense power held in calm reserve, punctuated by explosions of apocalyptic violence. A typical cycle began at dawn. He would be logging at the surface, his great body a floating island, one hemisphere of his brain asleep while the other maintained conscious control of his blowhole. His respiration was a slow, metronomic event, a sharp, echoing pffshh of condensation as he exhaled, a pause of 3 or 4 minutes, then a deeper inhalation. As the sun warmed his back, he would become fully active. His first act was always a deep, scanning dive, sending out broad-spectrum sonar pulses that painted the seascape for kilometers around. This was his morning brief. He would identify the positions of fish schools, the lazy drift of jellyfish blooms, the distant, chattering echolocation of dolphin pods, and the slow, heavy heartbeats of other great whales. On this day, his scan returned a prize. 20 kilometers to the northwest, he detected the distinctive, slow, paired echoes of a baleen whale cow and her calf, members of the genus Piscobalaena, a medium-sized sea-teether. The calf was late season, perhaps only a few weeks old and struggling to keep pace on the long migratory journey. The mother's echo was strong but laced with fatigue. A calculation, cold and precise, was made in the Livyatan's complex brain. The energy expenditure of the hunt versus the caloric yield of the kill. The risk of injury from the mother's thrashing flukes. The outcome was never in doubt. He began to move. His approach was a masterpiece of predatory stealth. He dove deep, to where the sunlight faded to a deep blue twilight, and swam on a long, silent intercept course. He used the thermocline, a layer where water temperature changed rapidly, to help scatter and muffle any sound waves that might betray his presence. He ceased all active echolocation, relying on the passive sounds of the whales ahead, the rush of water over their bodies, the occasional blow, the calf's higher-pitched vocalizations. For an hour, he was a ghost, a vast shadow rising from the abyss. When he was within a kilometer, he began his final stalk. He angled upward, positioning himself directly beneath the unsuspecting pair. His colossal heart rate, which could drop to a mere 10 beats per minute during the dive, now began to climb. Oxygenated blood flooded his muscles. He could see them now as vague, backlit shapes against the bright surface, the smaller form nestled close to the larger. He selected his target, not the calf, but the mother. A calf was easy meat, but it was the mother's massive tongue, thick blubber layer, and nutrient-rich organs that represented the true bounty. To get them, he had to neutralize the threat. With a convulsive, titanic contraction of his tail musculature, he exploded upward. His speed for an animal of his bulk was breathtaking, a burst of over 40 kilometers per hour. He aimed not for the body, but for the point where the mother's left flipper joined her torso. He hit her like a living torpedo. The impact was a deep, visceral thump that resonated through the water for miles. The seat of their cow was flung sideways, a bellow of shock and agony erupting from her blowhole in a spray of vapor and mucus. Her flipper was shattered, hanging uselessly. Before the shockwaves had even dissipated, the Livyatan opened his jaws. In a single, fluid motion, he clamped onto her flank just behind the rib cage. His teeth punched through blubber and muscle, seeking purchase on the spine. He did not shake her like a terrier with a rat. Instead, he used his immense neck and body weight as a lever, twisting. The sound of vertebrae grinding and then snapping was sharp and final. The great baleen whale shuddered and went limp, her lungs flooding with water. The calf, terrified, bleated and tried to nudge its mother. The Livyatan ignored it for the moment. He began to feed, employing a methodical, energy-efficient technique. He used his teeth to shear off great sheets of blubber which he swallowed whole. He then worked his way into the body cavity, seeking the tongue, a muscle weighing hundreds of kilograms, and the massive, oil-rich liver. The water filled with a cloud of blood and viscera, attracting the first scavengers, sleek blue sharks and hungry seabirds diving from above. Only when he had taken his fill of the prime cuts did he turn his attention to the calf, dispatching it with a single, crushing bite to the skull. He would return to this floating larder over the next 2 days, until nothing remained but a skeleton that would eventually spiral down to the seafloor to begin its own ecological legacy as a whale fall. Such a kill could sustain him for weeks. In the aftermath, he entered a period of calm dominance. He would travel the migration highways, his mere presence altering the behavior of every creature he passed. Dolphin pods would cease their chatter and flee at his approach. Seals would porpoise frantically for the nearest rocky shore. Even other large predators, like the giant mako Cosmopolidatus haestalis, would give him a wide berth. He was the ultimate regulator, the keystone species whose predatory pressure shaped the morphology, behavior, and distribution of an entire ecosystem. His solitude was not absolute. During the breeding season, he would seek out the acoustic signatures of female pods in the warm, sheltered lagoons. Here he would encounter other mature males. These meetings were not casual. They were formal, violent rituals of dominance. 2 bulls might size each other up for hours, swimming parallel, emitting deep, pulsed coda sequences that were both challenge and assessment. If neither backed down, it would escalate to physical confrontation. They would clash head-on, their colossal skulls meeting with a sound like colliding submarines. They would rake their teeth against each other's tough skin, inflicting long, bleeding furrows. These battles were rarely to the death. The risk of mortal injury to the victor was too high, but they were brutal tests of strength, endurance, and pain tolerance. The victor earned the right to mate, passing on the genes for his robust skull, his powerful jaw muscles, his strategic intelligence. In the quiet moments between the hunts and the battles, the Livyatan exhibited behaviors that spoke of a profound, sentient awareness. He would spy hop, raising his gargantuan head vertically out of the water, his small, dark eyes surveying volcanic islands wreathed in mist, or strange, floating rafts of pumice from distant eruptions. He would breach, launching his entire multi-ton bulk into the air, the crash of his re-entry a declaration of existence that echoed across the empty sea. On calm, clear nights, he would rest at the surface, his blowhole exhaling a faint, phosphorescence-tinged plume as he seemed to contemplate the endless sweep of stars. The same stars that shone on a world that was, slowly and imperceptibly, beginning to change around him. He was at the zenith of his power, a perfect engine of predation in a world built to fuel him. But the seasons of his life and of his epoch were finite. The first faint chill of a coming winter, both literal and metaphorical, was on the wind. While the image of Livyatan locked in titanic combat with great whales is its defining tableau, to paint him solely as a whale hunter is to underestimate the breadth of his mastery. He was an opportunistic hypercarnivore, a connoisseur of high-calorie flesh, and his kingdom had multiple layers, both literal and ecological. His life was not a single-note song of rampaging violence, but a symphony of different hunting strategies across the vast vertical column of the ocean. The sunlit surface world was his primary domain, but beneath it lay the mesopelagic zone, the twilight realm between 200 and 1,000 meters, where sunlight faded to a perpetual gloom and bioluminescence became the dominant light source. Here, the rules changed. This was the realm of the deep water squid, and for a sperm whale lineage, even one adapted for macropredation, this was an ancestral hunting ground he could not entirely ignore. On nights when the lunar cycle provided little surface light, or when the whale migration lanes were quiet, he would embark on a different kind of hunt. His dive into the abyss was a physiological marvel. As he descended, his heart rate plummeted. Blood flow was redirected from his extremities and digestive system to his vital organs and his brain. The flexible rib cage of a whale allowed his lungs to collapse progressively, preventing nitrogen narcosis and the bends. His metabolism slowed to a crawl. He became a ghost, sinking into silence and darkness. At around 500 meters, he would begin his active hunt. His world was now one of sound alone. He switched from the broad scanning clicks used near the surface to a faster, more frequent clicking pattern. A click, click, click like a frantic telegraph key. In the utter blackness, his sonar painted a surreal, shifting picture. He detected the vague, amorphous shapes of jellyfish and siphonophores, their delicate tissues returning soft echoes. He identified the dense, sharp signatures of deep-sea fish with gas-filled swim bladders. But his target was different, a shape that returned a complex muscular echo with no bright lung signature, and often a confusing, diffuse outline. A giant squid, perhaps Architeuthis dux, would appear in his sonar as a large, pulsating core with long, trailing appendages. The hunt in the deep was a duel of ambush versus biosonar. The squid, sensing the vibrations of his approach, might ink, releasing a cloud of bioluminescent fluid designed to confuse and startle. The Livyatan sonar would cut through the cloud, locking onto the fleeing prey. The final approach was cautious. The squid's tentacles, armed with serrated suckers and a sharp beak, were dangerous. A full-grown giant squid could be 12 meters long, a formidable opponent even for him. He would aim to disable it quickly, often with a ramming strike to the squid's mantle, followed by a bite aimed at severing the head from the tentacles. The struggles were violent, chaotic, and illuminated by strobing bursts of alien light from the squid's photophores. If tentacles wrapped around his head, the sucker rings would leave their characteristic circular scars, welding themselves to his skin. He would surface from such a dive hours later, sometimes with pale, ghostly strands of squid tentacle still draped over his snout, a testament to the battle in the lightless world below. But the depths were not the only alternative larder. The coastlines offered another. He learned the haul out sites of pinnipeds, the rocky shelves and isolated beaches where thousands of seals and sea lions would congregate to breed, molt, and rest. A careful, stealthy approach was key here. He would use subsurface rocks and kelp forests for cover, his sonar mapping the screeching, chaotic mass of bodies on land. Timing was everything. He would wait for a moment when a fat, lazy bull seal or a group of juveniles ventured too far from the safety of the group. Then he would strike with shocking speed, lunging from the surf like a primordial monster. The technique was different. A rapid snap of the jaws, a grip and retreat. He would seize a seal in his mouth and in one motion, wrench it back into the deeper water where it would be drowned and consumed. These coastal raids were high risk, high reward. A misjudgment could see him beached, a death sentence for a creature of his bulk. But the payoff was a concentrated package of rich blubber and protein, easier to catch than a whale and with far less risk of injury. He was also a scavenger. The ocean was a vast network of scent plumes and acoustic signals, and the death of a large animal was a broadcast event. He would detect the distant, frantic feeding sounds of shark packs or the sinking echo of a dead whale from kilometers away. He had no compunction about stealing a meal. A group of early great white sharks or the massive, predatory snapper Megapiranha panamensis feeding on a carcass would scatter at the approach of his immense silhouette. He would simply move in and take the choicest remaining parts, his size and reputation granting him immediate possession. This was not laziness, but energy economics. Why spend thousands of calories on a risky hunt when a few hundred calories of intimidation could secure a meal? This varied diet came at a cost. His magnificent teeth, the source of his biting power, were his most vulnerable point. Unlike a shark, he could not replace them. A tooth broken off at the gum line was gone forever. The stresses were immense. The sudden, jarring impact with bone during a whale hunt, the hard, chitinous beak of a giant squid, the grit and sand sometimes ingested with a coastal seal. Dental abscesses were a constant threat. An infection at the root of a tooth in the confined space of his jawbone could fester for years, a source of chronic, debilitating pain that could eventually poison his bloodstream or weaken his jaw to the point of fracture. The wear patterns on his teeth told the story of his life, which side he preferred to bite with, the types of prey he tackled most often, the tremendous, repeated forces they withstood. Parasites were another constant siege. Barnacles like Coronula and Xenobalanus would latch onto his skin, particularly around the edges of his flukes, his flippers and the calloused skin of his head, creating drag as he swam. Whale lice, cyanid crustaceans, swarmed in the folds of his skin and around his genitals and eyes, feeding on his dead epidermis. In the warm coastal waters, remeras would hitch rides, their sucking discs anchored to his flanks. He would breach partly to dislodge some of these hangers-on, and he would rub against rocky outcrops or sandy seabeds to scrape others away. But it was a never-ending battle. His life, therefore, was a complex calculus of energy acquisition versus expenditure, of risk versus reward, played out across multiple environments. He was a generalist in the realm of high-quality prey, a master of the surface, the coast, and the abyss. This adaptability was the hallmark of his success. It allowed him to thrive in a world of fluctuating resources, to weather times when the great whale migrations were sparse, to turn the entire ocean into his larder. He was not just a whale killer. He was the ultimate sovereign of the Miocene seas, whose authority was recognized in every wave, from the sun-drenched surface to the eternal darkness of the deep. Solitude was the condition of his prime, but it was not his nature. Livyatan Melvillei was, at its core, a social creature. The intelligence required to coordinate the hunting of intelligent, fast-moving prey, the complex bonds evident in nursery pods, and the intricate rituals of male competition all pointed to a mind capable of deep communication and cultural learning. His world was not silent. It was a dense, layered tapestry of sound, a living internet of clicks, creaks, bangs, and pulses that carried information across vast, dark distances. To understand him, one must listen. The foundation of this acoustic world was echolocation, but it served a dual purpose. The standard foraging click, a rapid tick-tick-tick-tick, was his active sonar. Produced by the paired phonic lips in his nasal passages, these clicks were focused into a directional beam by the massive, oil-filled spermaceti organ in his head. The returning echoes gave him a near photographic mental image. But these clicks were also social signals. The rate, rhythm, and intensity of a click train conveyed meaning. A slow, deliberate scan indicated a relaxed, surveying state. A rapid, staccato barrage signaled intense focus, usually on prey. A sudden cessation of clicks was as telling as a shout. It meant danger, stealth, or surprise. Beyond sonar was the realm of social sound. These were produced not just by the phonic lips, but through the complex manipulation of air in his nasal sacs and sinuses. The vocabulary was rich and context-dependent. Social whistles and pulsed calls were used for close-range communication within the pod. A mother had a specific contact call for her calf, a soft, repeating pulse that said, "I am here, stay close." Calves had a distinctive, higher-pitched distress call that would bring any adult in the pod rushing to their aid. During playful interactions or cooperative hunting, a series of excited, rapid chirps and squeals would be exchanged, facilitating coordination and reinforcing social bonds. For our solitary male, the most important social sounds were the low-frequency coda sequences. These were patterns of 3 to 20 powerful resonant clicks, emitted at a much slower rate than echolocation clicks. They functioned as acoustic identity cards and long-range broadcast signals. Each mature male likely had a distinctive coda, a signature that announced his presence, size, and perhaps even his condition. Emitted near the surface, these codas could travel for hundreds of kilometers through the ocean's sound fixing and ranging SOFAR channel, a layer of water that acts as a waveguide for low-frequency sound. He used his coda for several purposes. As he patrolled his vast range, he would periodically broadcast it. This was a statement of occupation. This is my domain. To any females in the area, it was an advertisement of his fitness. To other males, it was both a warning and an invitation. A rival male hearing the coda could gauge the emitter's size deeper. Slower clicks generally indicated a larger animal and distance. He could then choose to answer with his own coda, initiating a long-distance dialogue that could prevent a physically costly confrontation, or he could move closer, escalating toward a physical meeting. When two males did meet, their acoustic interaction became a duel. They would first exchange codas, sizing each other up acoustically. Then they might escalate to burst pulses, extremely rapid, repetitive clicks that sounded like a buzzsaw or a creaking door. These were aggressive, meant to intimidate and disorient. In the final moments before a physical clash, they might produce bangs, single, concussive, low-frequency pulses of immense power, capable of stunning small prey. Used against a rival, they were sonic body blows, meant to convey the sheer physical force the emitter could bring to bear. This acoustic culture implied something profound: knowledge transfer. The hunting techniques Livyatan used, the coordinated herding, the strategic ramming, the selective targeting of vital areas, were not purely instinctual. They were learned. Calves learned by observing their mothers and other pod members. Sub-adults practiced and refined these techniques in play and during supervised hunts. Different pods, separated by geography, might develop slight variations in technique, even distinct dialects in their coda patterns, the beginnings of culture. A young male dispersing from his natal pod carried not just his genes, but a library of learned behaviors, the location of reliable pinniped haul-outs, the timing of whale migrations past certain seamounts, the best ambush points in particular submarine canyons. This cultural knowledge, passed down through generations, was as critical to the species' success as its formidable teeth. The social structure itself was likely matrilineal and fission fusion. Core units consisted of mothers, their calves, and related females, forming stable, long-term bonds. These pods would sometimes merge with others for feeding or socializing, then separate again. Adolescent males would eventually leave these natal pods, sometimes forming temporary, loose bachelor groups, where they continued to learn and test their skills against peers. As they matured and grew more aggressive and competitive, they would break away to become solitary roamers, like our protagonist, interacting with the social pods primarily during the breeding season. This social intelligence gave Livyatan a critical edge over its great rival, Megalodon. The shark was a supreme solitary predator, but it could not coordinate. It could not surround a prey item, drive it to the surface, or attack from multiple angles to confuse and overwhelm. It could not teach its young complex hunting strategies. In the ocean's silent wars, the whale's ability to communicate, to plan, and to act as a collective was a force multiplier that made up for any slight disadvantage in brute strength or stealth. The clicks and codas were more than just sound. They were the ligaments of a social superorganism, the commands of a strategic mind, and the threads that connected a solitary king to the society that forged him. When he broadcast his deep, resonant coda into the watery darkness, he was not just making noise. He was asserting his identity, defining his territory, and participating in the ancient, echoing conversation of his kind, a conversation that would one day fall silent. For millions of years, the world had been a warm, wet cradle for Livyatan. But planetary climates are not static. They pulse to the rhythm of orbital cycles, tectonic shifts, and atmospheric chemistry. During the late Miocene, roughly 10 to 5 million years ago, the Earth began to cool. This was not a sudden cataclysm, but a slow, inexorable trend, a tightening of the world's climatic belt. The triggers were complex. The continuing uplift of mountain ranges like the Himalayas and the Andes altered atmospheric circulation. The gradual closure of the Central American seaway began to reshuffle ocean currents, and a long-term drawdown of atmospheric carbon dioxide allowed more of the sun's heat to radiate back into space. The effects were first felt at the poles. The Antarctic ice sheet, once shrunken, began to expand and thicken. This locked away vast quantities of the planet's water, and global sea levels started their long retreat from the continental interiors. The great epicontinental seas, those shallow marine paradises, began to drain, severing habitats and reducing the sprawling nursery grounds and feeding areas. Coastlines we know today began to emerge from the waves. For the ocean's chemistry and circulation, the changes were profound. Colder, denser polar water increased the intensity of global thermohaline circulation. Currents became stronger, more focused, and potentially less predictable. The rich, steady upwelling systems that had fueled the Humboldt Current's miraculous productivity began to fluctuate. Periods of fantastic plenty could be followed by sudden, catastrophic collapses, oceanographic dead zones, where upwelling failed and the phytoplankton blooms did not materialize. The foundation of the entire food web became unstable. Our Livyatan, now entering the later decades of his life, began to sense these shifts in his bones and in his empty stomach. The great migrations of baleen whales, his primary prey, started to change. Some species, like the smaller cetators, began to decline, unable to cope with the changing distribution of their krill and copepod prey. Others evolved, growing larger or developing different filter feeding strategies to target different types of plankton. Their migration routes shifted, seeking out the newly configured currents and surviving productivity hotspots. The predictable, clockwork patterns of the whale highways began to break down. Hunts became longer, more arduous, and less frequently successful. He would sometimes travel for weeks, his powerful sonar scanning an eerily quiet sea, the familiar, comforting echoes of large whale lungs frustratingly absent. New competitors emerged from the changing ecosystem. The ancestors of modern killer whales, Orcinus citoniensis, were smaller but were evolving their signature pack hunting intelligence and relentless aggression. They targeted a broader range of prey: seals, dolphins, fish, even whale calves, with terrifying efficiency. A large, solitary Livyatan was not their target, but they competed for the same diminishing pool of pinnipeds and smaller whales. More troubling were the new, agile predators that filled niches in the cooling seas. Larger, more robust species of great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, were evolving, perfect hunters of seals and mid-sized whales. While not a direct threat to a healthy adult Livyatan, they represented another drain on the system, another mouth competing for the high-calorie prey that fueled the giant. Perhaps the most significant change was the decline of his ancient rival, Carcharocles megalodon. The giant shark, even more specialized and requiring staggering amounts of meat, was acutely vulnerable to the disruption of the whale populations. As the great whales became scarcer and their migrations less predictable, the megalodon's energy equation ceased to balance. An adult megalodon needed a whale kill every few weeks. A failed season could mean starvation. The fossil record shows megalodon populations beginning their steep decline in the late Miocene, a few million years before Livyatan would follow. The dual monarchy of the Miocene seas was crumbling from within. For our aging male, the world was becoming a lonelier and more demanding place. The old aches, a stiffening vertebra from an old ramming injury, a persistent, throbbing pain from a cracked tooth root, were harder to ignore. His breath hold was not what it was. Recovery from a deep dive took longer. His once peerless echolocation would occasionally waver, a faint ringing in the echo that blurred the edges of his sonic world. He was a specialist in a world that was increasingly favoring generalists. His immense size, which had been his greatest asset, became a liability. He required a staggering amount of food, hundreds of kilograms of rich blubber and meat per day, and his preferred prey was evaporating. He could not easily switch to eating fish or squid in the quantities needed. His metabolism and dentition were optimized for a different diet. He was like a mighty oak, perfectly adapted to a rich, deep soil, watching as the forest around him slowly turned to scrubland. His final years were a portrait of gradual decline. He ranged farther into unfamiliar waters driven by hunger. He took greater risks, venturing into shallower bays to raid seal colonies, once beneath his notice but now vital calories. He was more likely to scavenge, to chase off smaller predators from their kills, a behavior that spoke of desperation rather than dominance. The proud, resonant coda he broadcast into the water was emitted less frequently, and when it was, it carried the subtle, hollow timbre of an animal under nutritional stress. The end, when it came, was not a dramatic battle with a rival or a shark. It was likely a culmination of slow, grinding pressures. On a day when his sonar detected a small, ailing baleen whale, an opportunity he could not pass up, he marshaled his remaining strength for one last hunt. The chase was sluggish. The ramming impact sent a jolt of agony through his old injuries, and the kill was messy. As he fed on the meager carcass, a shadow, perhaps a persistent megalodon or an opportunistic swarm of large sharks drawn by his weakened state, lingered at the edge of his perception. But the true failure was internal. His great heart, stressed by the exertion and years of compensating for chronic pain and poor nutrition, faltered. A vessel burst. An arrhythmia took hold. In the midst of his final meal, the signals simply ceased. The colossal body, now a lifeless mass, began its slow, final descent into the abyss, leaving behind a cooling world that no longer had a place for its king. The age of the macropredatory sperm whale was drawing to a close, a victim of its own magnificent specialization in a sea of change. His reign was over, but his story was merely entering a new, vastly slower chapter. The great body, devoid of the animating spark, tilted nose down and began to sink. The descent into the abyss was a silent, balletic fall through the deepening blues into absolute blackness. It took hours for the 65-ton mass to settle on the soft, oozy plain of the seafloor, over a kilometer below the sunlit world he had ruled. Here, in the cold, high-pressure darkness, his body ceased to be a carcass and became an event, a whale fall. The first phase was the mobile scavenger stage. Almost immediately, the silence was broken. Sleeper sharks, drawn by the low-frequency vibrations of the impact and the first scent molecules, emerged from the gloom. Giant, eel-like hagfish, attracted by the smell of death, knotted themselves into writhing balls, using their rasping tongues to bore into the flesh. Large, deep-sea crabs and lithidid king crabs scuttled across the seabed to join the feast. Over months, this consortium of large necrophages stripped the body clean of soft tissue, reducing the Leviathan to a skeleton still held together by ligaments and surrounded by a halo of enriched sediment from the raining detritus. Then began the enrichment opportunist stage, which could last up to 2 years. A different community moved in, colonizing the bones and the surrounding sediment, which was now fat with organic leftovers. Polychaete worms, crustaceans like amphipods and ostracods, and snails by the thousands swarmed the site, processing the finer particles. Bacterial mats began to coat the bones, starting the process of chemical breakdown. The final and longest phase was the sulfophilic, sulfur-loving stage. This could sustain a specialized ecosystem for decades. Here, the true alchemy began. Anaerobic bacteria, deep within the bones themselves, began to break down the lipids, the oils, still trapped in the porous cancellous bone. As a byproduct of this metabolism, they produced hydrogen sulfide, a toxic chemical that smells of rotten eggs. This hydrogen sulfide, seeping out from the bones, became the energy source for a whole new suite of life. Chemosynthetic bacteria formed dense, white or yellow mats on and around the skeleton. These bacteria, akin to those found at hydrothermal vents, use the hydrogen sulfide to produce organic matter, forming the base of a food web independent of sunlight. Specialized creatures evolved to thrive in this toxic oasis. Bone-eating worms of the genus Ostax, which bore root-like structures into the bone to digest the lipids. Eyeless, red-plumed tube worms. Mussels with symbiotic sulfide oxidizing bacteria in their gills. And a host of snails, clams, and crustaceans that fed on the bacterial mats or each other. The Great Skull, once the seat of a terrifying intelligence and a biological sonar cannon, was now a sprawling, bizarre reef of life, a chemosynthetic cathedral in the dark. While this eerie afterlife unfolded, a more profound transformation was underway. Fossilization. The seafloor sediment, a fine rain of planktonic skeletons, coccoliths and diatoms and terrestrial clay, continued to accumulate. Millimeter by millimeter, year by year, the skeleton was buried. This burial was crucial. It sealed the bones off from oxygen, preventing their total decomposition, and protected them from disruptive bottom currents or scavengers. Groundwater, rich in dissolved minerals like calcium carbonate calcite, silica chert, and iron pyrite, fool's gold, percolated through the sediment. This mineral-laden water seeped into the microscopic pores and canals of the whale's bones. Slowly, molecule by molecule, over tens of thousands of years, the original organic material, the collagen and hydroxyapatite, was replaced by these harder, more stable minerals. This process, called permineralization and replacement, turned the bone to stone, creating a perfect three-dimensional mineral replica. The intricate structures of the skull, the fine serrations on the teeth, the delicate vertebrae processes, all were preserved in stunning detail. But the story of the rock was not finished. The Earth's crust is restless. The Nazca Plate, upon which the skeleton rested, was slowly but inexorably being pushed eastward and downward beneath the South American plate in a process called subduction. This colossal tectonic force did not just consume the seafloor, it also crumpled and uplifted its edge. Over millions of years, the immense pressure and heat of this collision zone folded, faulted, and lifted the ancient seafloor sediments. What was once a deep, dark abyssal plain was thrust upward, thousands of meters into the air. The sea retreated. The ocean floor became dry land. The constant, gentle rain of marine snow was replaced by the howling, abrasive wind of a newborn desert. The Pisco Formation of coastal Peru is this lifted seafloor, a stark, beige and gray landscape of eroded badlands under a relentless sun. It is one of the richest marine fossil beds on Earth. Within its layers, the skeletons of countless whales, dolphins, seals, sharks, and seabirds are entombed, a silent crowd of Miocene ghosts. Our Livyatan skeleton lay among them, its bones now stone, encased in a concrete-like matrix of diatomite and sandstone. Erosion, the sculptor of deserts, began its work. Wind and occasional rare rains carved away the softer sediment, occasionally exposing a glimpse of what lay within. A curve of a rib, the tip of a giant tooth, the dense bulge of a vertebra. For perhaps 100,000 years, these clues lay exposed, unseen by any intelligent eye, waiting for a planet to produce a species curious enough to ask questions of the stone. The long, patient sleep of the stone-bound king was almost over. The time for remembrance was at hand. The Atacama Desert, where the Pisco Formation lies, is one of the driest places on Earth. Its stark, rain-starved hills hold secrets perfectly preserved by the aridity. For centuries, local people had found strange, giant bones in these hills, perhaps weaving them into legends of earth-shaking monsters. But it was not until the late 20th century that systematic scientific exploration began to reveal the scale of the treasure. The story of Livyatan's rediscovery is a tale of sharp eyes and collaborative science. In November 2008, a team of international paleontologists, including Dr. Olivier Lambert of the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences and Giovanni Bianucci of the University of Pisa, were conducting field work in the Cerro Colorado area of the Pisco Formation. They were veteran fossil hunters, their eyes tuned to the subtle differences in color and texture that betrayed a fossil buried in the rock. It was the Dutch researcher Klaas Post, a member of the team, who first saw it. A curved, dark shape, unlike the surrounding stone, projecting from a hillside. Not a rib or a vertebra, but something more substantial. With careful brushing, the truth began to emerge. A tooth. But not just any tooth. It was enormous, thick-rooted, and bore distinct, fine serrations along its edge. It was a predator's tooth, but of a scale and shape that defied immediate identification. As they excavated further, more teeth were found, and then the bedrock of the discovery, parts of a massive, fragmented skull. It was clearly a sperm whale, but the anatomy was all wrong. The skull was shorter, more robust, and most shockingly, it possessed deep, clear sockets in the upper jaw to hold large, functional teeth that would interlock with the lower teeth. This was unprecedented. The excavation that followed was a meticulous ballet of paleontology under the punishing sun. The brittle, fossilized bones were carefully exposed, photographed, and mapped in situ. Then they were coated in protective plaster and burlap jackets, field jackets, to stabilize them for transport. Each jacket, containing a piece of the puzzle, was hauled carefully down the arid slopes. The sheer size and weight of the skull fragments spoke to the immensity of the creature. Back in the laboratory, the painstaking preparation began. Using fine needles, air scribes, miniature jackhammers, and brushes, technicians spent months removing the hard surrounding matrix, grain by grain, to reveal the bone beneath. As the skull was slowly reconstructed, a monster took shape. The rostrum snout was incredibly thick and dense, built to withstand colossal impact forces. The basin for the spermaceti organ was vast, indicating a sound production and ramming apparatus of unimaginable power. And the teeth, they were breathtaking. The largest, from the lower jaw, measured 36 centimeters long and 12 centimeters wide at the base. They were the largest biting teeth of any known animal, extinct or living. The team realized they had not just a new species, but a new concept of a prehistoric predator. In 2010, they published their findings in the journal Nature. They named the genus Livyatan after the biblical sea monster and the species Melvillei in honor of Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick. The name was a perfect fusion of myth and literature, fitting for a creature that seemed to spring from both. The impact on paleontology was immediate and profound. Livyatan shattered the previous narrative of the Miocene apex predators. It was no longer a simple story of Megalodon as the undisputed king. Here was evidence of a hypercarnivorous sperm whale, a fully realized super predator that likely preyed upon the same large whales as the giant shark. It forced a complete re-evaluation of the Miocene marine ecosystem. Now, it was a dual monarchy, a tense, dynamic balance between two differently adapted titans. The discovery filled an ecological gap and explained the extreme adaptations found in some contemporary baleen whales, which may have evolved thicker bones and different behaviors as defenses against such a terrifying predator. Livyatan also cast new light on the evolution of sperm whales. It showed that the modern, deep-diving, suction-feeding sperm whale, Pfister macrocephalus, is not the default model, but rather one specialized branch of a once more diverse family. The macropredatory, raptorial lifestyle represented by Livyatan was a spectacularly successful alternative path that dominated for millions of years before the changing climate made it untenable. For our specific whale, the individual whose life we have followed, the discovery was his return to the world of light and consciousness. The pain in his jaw from that abscessed tooth, the thrill of the hunt, the deep rumble of his coda, all were gone, translated into the silent, stony geometry of a fossil. Yet in that geometry, scientists could read the story. The wear patterns on his teeth spoke of his diet. The healed fractures in his ribs told of violent encounters survived. The size and shape of his skull whispered of his power. His legacy is multifaceted. He is a testament to the incredible, often terrifying creativity of evolution. He is a warning about the fragility of specialization in a changing world. And he is a symbol of the profound mysteries that still lie buried, waiting to rewrite our understanding of life's history. When a visitor stands before the reconstructed skull of Livyatan Melvillei in a museum, they are not just looking at a dead monster. They are looking at a king. They are meeting the sovereign of the Miocene seas, a creature who lived, hunted, loved, and died in a world we can only imagine, and who, through the silent language of stone, has finally told us his story. The long silence is broken. The Leviathan remembers, and in remembering, ensures he will never be forgotten.